Welcome, friends. We are to chapter 6 today, and I figured since chapter 6 is quite short, we'll be reading chapter 7 as well. Chapter 6 The Earth is a Living Being. Not long after we had finished setting up camp, I had a second good conversation with Rolling Thunder. There was a pleasant lightheartedness in the air as we rode from the Palisades to Rolling Thunder's home in Carlin for lunch. After lunch, we were going to nearby Elko, Nevada, for provisions. I had found Rolling Thunder an excellent companion for a walk, or a ride, or hauling water, or pitching a tent, or having a simple meal. At times he was downright funny, and when others wanted to be funny, their humor succeeded with Rolling Thunder. Although I had never seen him in the slightest hint of anguish or despair, and he has never given to depression, he becomes obviously tired when it seems appropriate, and he might even show anger when it is of some use. I am convinced that every image, every mood, and every reaction he displays has a purpose. Each day it was becoming clear to me that Rolling Thunder was a teacher who could offer me insights that I could never achieve in the laboratory or discover in the library. Rolling Thunder's house was refreshingly cool. On the table with the meat and salad was a large pitcher of lemonade, and in the other room was a squirrel cage evaporative cooler whirling in the window. It was getting hot up in the canyon. The sun was strong and the tents were like ovens. The only comfort was to stay in the shadows of the trees, and that was not usually convenient. A nearby place to swim would be a help. There was a stream not too far from the campsite, but I had not had the chance to walk that way. In any case, I had noticed an inviting-looking stream as we rode out of the hills that day. "Are those streams up there okay to swim in?" I asked. "I don't like the kids or my kids to swim in any of those streams around here," Rolling Thunder said. "Other kids do it, and mine have, I know, but I don't like the idea. These streams are polluted, and that water is dangerous, especially if you should happen to swallow any amount of it. You know, the natives around here have a saying, 'Never trust the water downstream from a white man.' This land was all pure at one time. The whole country was pure, the air, the water, everything. Now there's hardly any pure water left, from the major rivers to even little streams in secluded areas. If the white man's gotten to it, it's no longer pure. And it hasn't taken him long. It hasn't taken the white man long at all." His words went on like a buzzing in my ears. I just kept thinking about a nice cold swim, a place that could be reached by a car. I remembered someone mentioning a small lake where water went over it. I wondered if Rolling Thunder would know about that lake. Perhaps he could tell me whether it would be all right and where to find it. He was still talking. I had not been really listening, yet I must have heard it all. And Rolling Thunder said something that caught my attention. He called the earth an organism. I had never heard it just like that. After my return from years spent in Asia, I had begun to see the oneness of the world. I could think of the world as a single mind, in a sense, by thinking of all the nations and races and problems collectively. I knew of people from many countries and from the United Nations who spoke of world consciousness. Many were urging an awareness of the reality of the earth as one planet that should not be foolishly divided into parts and the things on the earth. Water, air, even people and their cultures, could not be contained by boundaries conjured up by man. Rolling Thunder had somehow gone from streams to veins of flowing blood. Somehow the sand, soil, plants, rivers, and streams, and air were all a body. I do not recall the words, but he managed to present a number of impressions instantaneously, giving rise to new perceptions in me. This earth a body, a gigantic body of conscious, struggling, living being. The body belongs to a being, an individual with an identity and a purpose. That being exists here now. We have to be within it, like cells. Had I been listening with all of my intellectual, analytical habits, this feeling would not have taken hold. I would have heard it too literally and gotten caught up in the comparisons, but my mind was off guard. Rolling Thunder had spoken too simply, too spontaneously. One would expect such perception to come under a stormy sky, or when one was looking over the land from an airplane, or laying down upon some green meadow. It had come from Rolling Thunder while we were eating at his table. At any rate, that all too temporary awareness has never returned exactly, only the memory. I have since thought to ask Rolling Thunder to run through the whole thing again from the beginning, just as he did then. It is an awareness that I should like to have again. I have since come to know some part of the Indian prophecy that is preserved chiefly by the Hopi people and maintained by traditional Indian spokesmen everywhere. The current significant part of these prophecies pertains to an approaching transition that is often called the Day of Purification. This prophecy coincides with the claims of ecologists and scientists who believe that imbalance in nature has passed the point of no return. Yet the traditional native does not await some kind of ecological doomsday. Instead, he awaits the moment of climax with hopeful anticipation. During our lunch with Rolling Thunder, he said, "When you have pollution in one place, it spreads all over. It spreads just as arthritis or cancer spreads in the body. The earth is sick now because the earth is being mistreated. And some of the problems that may occur, some of the natural disasters that might happen in the near future, are only the natural readjustments that have to take place to throw off that sickness. A lot of things are on this land that don't belong here. They're foreign objects, like viruses or germs. Now, we may not have recognized that fact when it happens, but a lot of things that are going to happen in the future will really be the Earth's attempt to throw off these sicknesses. This is really going to be like fever or vomiting, what you might call physiological adjustment. It's very important for people to realize this. The Earth is a living organism, the body of a higher individual who has a will and wants to be well, who is at times less healthy or more healthy, physically and mentally. People should treat their own bodies with respect. It's the same thing with the Earth. Too many people don't know that when they harm the Earth, they harm themselves. Nor do they realize that when they harm themselves, they harm the Earth. Some of these people interested in ecology want to protect the Earth, and yet they will cram anything into their mouths just for tripping or for freaking out, even using some of our sacred agents. Some of these things I call helpers. They are very good if they are taken very, very seriously, but they have to be used in the right way, otherwise they'll be useless and harmful, and most people don't know about these things. All of these things have to be understood. It's not very easy for you people to understand these things. Understanding is not knowing the kind of facts that your books and teachers talk about. I tell you that understanding begins with love and respect. It begins with respect for the Great Spirit, and the Great Spirit is the life that is in all things, all creatures and the plants, and even the rocks and the minerals. All things, I mean all things, have their own will, their own way, and their own purpose. This is what is to be respected. Such respect is not a feeling or an attitude only. It's a way of life. Such respect means that we never stop realizing our own and never neglect to carry out our own obligation to ourselves and our environment. Of all the teachings I have heard, these words are the most important on the path and the most valuable for the contemporary aspirant upon the path of karma yoga, the path of action. No teaching for the path of action could be more fundamental or primary than the teachings of love and respect for oneself, one's world, and for the Great Spirit, which is in all life in all things. The aspirant can perform no greater service for his world than to be mindful of their own acts. Even their thoughts and speech become a part of the condition of that world. The lesson from that day at Rolling Thunder is now a part of my own consciousness. His words provided me with an opening through which further insights could come. Whatever I do, wherever I am, I will always be at that table with Rolling Thunder. Alright, that's the end of Chapter 6, and now on to Chapter 7, Sub-Chief Oscar Johnny. Oscar Johnny joined us up in camp one evening at sunset. He drove up in his shiny new green Ford pickup, parked just off the dirt road and walked up to the fire. He had come just in time for our evening meal. With our new outdoor appetites, we prepared food in great abundance. This night it was fried chicken, a large pot of stewed vegetables, baked potatoes from the hot coals. Oscar Johnny ate with us, and then, a cup of coffee in hand, he sat by the fire and talked until after dark. Rolling Thunder had told me about Oscar Johnny. He's a traditional, hereditary sub-chief of the Western Shoshone. Now there's a man who knows a lot. You might not recognize it at first, but he knows a lot. And if you were to ask him, he wouldn't tell you. To me, Oscar Johnny looked like a dark and husky truck driver or bulldoze operator. I later discovered that he was both. He had a home on the Ruby Valley Reservation and often traveled on tribal business to all the reservations throughout Shoshone territory, but he also had a home in Elko and maintained a full-time job with road contractors. His tribal position was hereditary. His fathers and his fathers before him had been sub-chiefs of the Shoshone. He knew the vast Shoshone lands. Like the typical native scout, he knew every hill and valley, every river and stream, and the location of all the trees and plants that his people once depended on for food. He knew the terrain of the tradition as well, but unlike the vast desert lands, there were places in this psychic terrain, the centuries-old oral traditions, that were not so easily accessible. Oscar Johnny was cautious of what might be unsafe or misleading if it were told out of context to people outside of his tradition. Like Rolling Thunder, he was not inclined toward right, opinion-serving explanations, yet he was willing to participate in the growing communication between traditional peoples and their friends in the new society, hoping to satisfy and stimulate their interest. Oscar Johnny spoke of Shoshone customs about food and clothing, marriages and wedding costumes. He talked of parents and grandparents and the stories the elders told. Many questions were asked. I had questions too, but I remembered Rolling Thunder saying, if you were to ask him, he wouldn't tell you. So I did not ask. A boy's grandparents usually find the wife for him. They make a buckskin outfit for him to wear at the wedding. They make it for when he's a kid. They put it away for the wedding day. They make it the right size to fit on the wedding day, and they put it away. How do they know the right size? They just know. They have to know, so they know. They know the wedding day, and they know the size. It has to be right, so they have to know. They know the girl too, so they make her a dress, a wedding dress. It's a buckskin dress, a white buckskin dress, and it's the right size too, and they put it away to the wedding day. You mean the grandparents always pick out the girl their grandson marries? Well, they find her. They find the right girl. What about the grandparents' girl? Do they agree? Sure they agree. They say, yes, that's the one. Do the grandparents ever get to do the choosing? Do the girl's grandparents ever get to do the choosing? Well, it's the same thing. If they choose the right one, it's the same. How do they know which person is the right one for another to marry? Well, they just go looking into that, and they find the person who's going to marry. They find out in advance. That's the way they pick it. Why don't they let the person pick his own partner? Well, that's the one. That's the one he picks. That's what I meant by the right one. It's the one he picks. They just have to find her in advance. They have to find her because they have to make that buckskin dress. You mean they let the people find each other and decide to get married, but they know who they're going to marry in advance? Do they know and just not tell them? Well, it don't make any difference. The young ones know too, and then they ask. They ask their grandparents. You take some young buck, say he goes somewhere, say Wyoming, he sees the girl, the one they've already found, the one they made the dress for. He would have picked for her himself. Or maybe he doesn't know yet, maybe he feels something. So he goes to his grandparents next day and he says, have I been spoken for? Do you know my woman? Do you know who she is? Have you made the dress? Of course they know. And they made the dress, so then he asks, who is she? But they don't say. And then he asks more questions. He asks if she lives in Wyoming, and then he asks about her looks, and he finds out that way. How do they know that? Who knows? How about another cup of coffee? This is some pretty good coffee you got up here. Someone quickly reached for the coffee as though it might have been some bearing on whether Oscar continued. Everyone watched him, yet he appeared unaware that he was the center of attention. I recalled Rolling Thunder's words about Oscar Johnny, and I wondered whether he would have explained more if he had not been questioned. For a while, no one spoke, and I hoped the silence would encourage him. Used to be a boy's grandparents could tell him a lot, he said at last. They just looked into the matter and then they told him about it, and they helped him that way. Sometimes they told the parents and not the boy. They looked at the problems, how they come and go, and what he'd go through. And sometimes it could be changed too. They would tell about it and then it would be changed, and sometimes they wouldn't tell if there wasn't any use. They would know the boy's tastes, what he liked, and how that would change, and they could tell the things he would like next year and the things he would stop liking. But he didn't need to know. He would like whatever he liked, and he could like it better if he didn't know, and then it would stop. Maybe they would just tell the parents, and they would say, "Don't get so much leather for the boy. He won't care about it next year, so just let it be. Next year he'll like beads, so you just wait and see." "What do they, predict the future?" someone asked. Well, now just what do they do? That's a good question. Oscar Johnny is allowed another long silence, and since no one spoke, he did. That's more in the past than now. Some things they don't do now, and some people they don't know. Now you take these old arrowheads, these arrowheads like you find out in the desert, you find them in a lot of places, like California too, old ones. The old ones have been doctored, you can still tell. How can you tell it? Well, they might make an infection or something, there's something still in there. You can't analyze it, you can't find it by a chemist, but you can still tell. Now you take an old sharp stone, even the same kind, it won't do that. If it's not old doctored arrowhead, it won't do that. If you want to, you can try it. You can cut yourself under the skin by an arrowhead, then you'll know. It used to be the young bucks, before they went out hunting, they'd get their arrowheads, and the ones they made, they were ready. And the medicine man, he would take these arrowheads, because the bucks too, they do what the medicine man told them, and they would be prepared for the next day. How did the medicine man do the arrowheads? He doctored them. How? He had a way. He had his own things he used, I guess, but it wasn't a physical thing. He would do it in the night while the young bucks were asleep. The next morning the arrowheads would be ready. The others would know what had been done, but they wouldn't watch it or discuss it, and the medicine man could treat a person in the same way if he got wounded. Somebody might get a wound or an infection or a poison, the medicine man could cure that. He could convert those chemicals. Chemicals can be converted. How? Well, they do it in their mind first. They know how. They do it in a native way. But they need that knowledge, and they need control to do it. You take these cigarettes. These are all chemicals in here. Tar and chemicals. Maybe you don't know and how many chemicals are in there. This is not natural. And the old natives, they don't like it. They don't want these chemicals, and they don't want the smoking habit. The natives were the first to smoke tobacco. It's good. It's good for you, but the chemicals make you sick. Now you give one of these cigarettes to an old native medicine man, or even an old chief, and he takes it because you gave it to him. He takes it, but he doesn't get those chemicals. Never. Those chemicals make him sick. He feels it, and he converts them in his own body. He converts the chemicals. How does he do that? How do you convert chemicals in your own body? Oscar Johnny looked at the man who asked. Then he shrugged his shoulders in total disinterest. You got me. He quietly finished his coffee while I stared into the glowing coals of the fire. If such things were possible, I thought, it would be good for all of us. If he had the answers, why didn't he share them? I could understand Rolling Thunder's feelings against trying to spread the truth where it was not wanted. As far as I knew, neither swamis nor medicine man gave advice, teaching, or healing unless they were requested to do so. It was as though there was some law of invocation and response. One cannot be helped until he seeks help, cannot be taught until he tries to learn, cannot be answered until he asks. But why had Rolling Thunder said what he did about Oscar Johnny? Why, when others did ask, did they get only a shrug of the shoulders and silence? I was sure Oscar knew much more than he had volunteered, that he could have talked until daybreak and we would have listened and learned. I felt he had no interest in being one of a privileged few. He had no notions about privileged information. Neither Oscar Johnny nor his people held exclusive feelings. From the time the first foreigners set upon this soil, the natives shared with them. If they had chosen to do otherwise, history from that day to now might have been vastly different. They were as willing to share their psychic knowledge and their medicine as they were to share their knowledge of how to work the land, where to hunt, how to raise corn and other crops. But the newcomers turned out to be invaders who wanted nothing from the natives but their land, and they were willing to go to any length to get it. Native traditions were hidden away so that they could be preserved. Then came the age of technology. In the eyes of the natives, white Americans became interested in only the shadows of things and strove to ignore and even deny the realities behind them. Many researchers and historians have published accounts of American Indians that told of impressive feats and healing techniques. Yet contemporary professionals seemed afraid such accounts might contradict modern science. The dominant attitude was an instance that the modern methods and views had to be superior to the past, and natives were prosecuted for their practices, for performing healings, religious rituals, and sacred dances. Modern America had a new ideas of religion, popular Sunday morning activity, convenient source of social virtue. But when religion pretended to deal with facts about the universe, it became a threat to modern science. We sat quietly and drank our coffee. I remembered something Rolling Thunder had said the day we had lunch at his house. These days, people want everything in a hurry, and they want it without much effort. That's why they miss out on a lot of things. They miss a lot of understanding because they don't want to work for it. They want all the answers, right now, easy and quick. Oscar Johnny may have thought it would have been more... Oscar Johnny may have thought it would take more than one night to even set the stage for a different kind of learning. He may have thought his persistent questioners would want to debate. Maybe he would have been more accommodating if they had taken and asked less abruptly. They might have said, "How did you learn about these things, and how can I begin to learn?" In any case, I thought, the answers will be forthcoming, even from Oscar Johnny. I thought about the ancient prophecies that spoke of the day when children of the white man would begin to wear long hair, beads, and headbands. The day when the natives would find new friends among new people. There will be new people who will know how to listen, who will hear. Then the traditions will be shared. Oscar Johnny leaned forward and placed his empty cup on the ground. Looks like we might be all going out to Ruby Reservation in the morning. Are you going too? Well, I'm going to try to make it if I can. Rolling Thunder said, "You'd be people come in the morning. Guess I'll be on my way. Sun gets up very early these days." He walked out onto the road where he had parked his pickup and drove away, as straightforward and simply as if he talked to us that night. Never was I more certain of how poorly we judge knowledge and wisdom, who possess it, and how it is transmitted. And that is the end of chapter 7 as well, my friends. Niawa, thank you very much for listening. Take care.